Good morning, everybody. The least played class in Dungeons & Dragons Online is the Alchemist, and I have wondered why that is. Because from my perspective, Alchemist is one of the absolute best classes in the game. It has extremely good area of effect damage. It has fantastic group support with all the extra heals it can generate. It's got great soloing ability because your character is able to just pump yourself full of health and full of incredible buffs, as well as amazing crowd control effects. Alchemist just kind of has it all. And since I just made a sorcerer character and played that, which is easily one of the best characters in the game, I figured let's just play some Alchemist and try to get a handle on why Alchemist is the least played class. Now, some of you might think that Alchemist is the least played because it's a premium class, but that's not true. Some of the premium classes are very, very popular. Additionally, you might think, okay, well, it's just the newest class then. But Warlock came out, and Warlock was the most popular class by a huge margin, and it still is one of the most popular classes in Dungeons & Dragons Online, beating out many actual free-to-play classes in terms of its popularity. Statistics and such can be found in a link I'll put below to the DDO audit website, where you can track all these stats for yourself if you want to take a look. So if Alchemist is this amazing class, why the heck don't people play it? And the answer is the low levels. Alchemist is garbage until about level 6. Before then, almost all of your spells are bad, your damage is terrible, you can't melee stuff, it's just really, really bad. And I think that's what happens to people, is they pick up the Alchemist to start playing, and they try to play by themselves, either through running Korthos on Elite, maybe running into Keep on the Borderlands, and it just ends up being a complete dumpster fire. And it is. I repeatedly failed quests in Korthos Island that I never fail because Alchemist is so pathetically weak at level 1. Level 2, it doesn't really get any better. Level 3, it barely gets better when you get access to Greater Venom Vial, but even then, it's still an absolute nightmare just to get it to level 6. And then even once you do get it to level 6, well, all of a sudden, you unlock a lot of the bigger area of effect damage spells that make it feel a lot better. Alchemist doesn't have as many spell points as a lot of the other classes, so you end up still running into spell point issues if you're trying to solo. So then really, when does Alchemist start to get good? Well, the answer is, unfortunately, it starts to be kind of good at level 6, but it really gets most of its steam at level 12 when it gets access to the higher level multi-vial spell and just never really slows down. The second you hit 12 on an Alchemist, you just start blasting your way through and you make a joke of the rest of the entire game. It's extremely powerful. You have incredible crowd control, you have incredible damage, the healing is off the charts. Bombardier Alchemist just feels so good from level 12 all the way up to level 30. It's one of the fastest levelers I've ever played. But those early levels are very, very hard to deal with. And I think that really shows how big of an impact just the first few levels can be. Unlike something like a wizard, where you could summon a skeleton to fight for you, or you can use the Eldritch Knight tree to actually do a little bit of melee damage, Alchemist really has none of that and heavily struggles. However, if you happen to have a friend or two, Alchemist makes a fantastic low-level healer, which is extremely strong, allowing you to just jump into groups, whether they're on Elite difficulty or Reaper mode, join random people and say, hey guys, and just whip healing potions at everybody, keeping everyone alive. They're extremely cheap and area of effect, which just makes them viable and valuable in pretty much every single party. Alchemist Bombardiers are also some of the coolest in that they can kind of just use whatever. They get the spells of all the different element types, and you can use whichever element you want as you level up, so kind of have a mix of the different spells and cast them all as you go along. But once you get all the way up to level 12, the Alchemist is actually able to just focus in on one individual element by bypassing all immunities. So unlike a sorcerer who has to wait until they get to level 20 to do that, Alchemists actually get it at level 12, which is so strong and is one of the reasons why Alchemists can feel so fun to level once you hit 12. Now, Alchemists do suffer another problem, which does hit them as they move towards the endgame, which is that most of the good offensive attacks that you can get, especially in epics, just so happen to be evocation-based or necromancy-based, and not a lot of them are conjuration-based. Now, conjuration magic generally follows the rule of thumb that it should be an acid damage type to be conjuration. In a lot of cases, unless it's acid, it's not actually going to be conjuration based, which unfortunately means, let's say you want to play as a cold alchemist and you want to use Draconic Incarnation. Ooh, cold dragon breath? Yeah, that's evocation. Oh, but maybe you could play as a cold primal avatar. That's also evocation. So you end up running into a problem where a lot of your actual spells don't end up using conjuration, and you're kind of lumped into acid for the most part, or poison, both of which end up being conjuration for Draconic Incarnation. Now, what I found was that as you move into epics, Draconic Incarnation is not the only option, and in fact, I found I was actually having more fun with Primal Avatar. Primal Avatar was fantastic with this type of character, giving me instantaneous healing through Rejuvenation Cocoon, and amazing saveless damage over time effects with the Carrion Swarm. In general, the flexibility of Alchemist in epics, and the fact that also one multi-vial basically deletes every single pack from 20 all the way to level 30, it felt amazing. And not only did it feel amazing, Alchemist is so strong that I was able to take this character at level 25 and jump into some Reaper Ravenloft, a group that I was leading, and just kill everything. Lead the kills, kill all the people, because Alchemist is just so strong. You get additional damage that applies no matter if a monster makes their save or not, called the Burning Ambition dice, which just always works. And you can just throw on the Sharadi Mantle, so it does damage every single time you cast a spell, regardless as to whether the monsters make their saves or not. And all of a sudden, because you have so many spells that you're just constantly whipping at monsters, you're just dealing enough damage that it doesn't even matter that the monsters make their saves, they have evasion. Who cares? Alchemist just out-damage basically everything, and it makes it feel super good. So Reaper Sharn, Reaper Ravenloft, Reaper Feywild, all before 30 with the Alchemist, and just absolutely crushing it. Now, the limitations of Bombardier Alchemist is that it can't get as high DCs as some other classes, usually topping out around 110 for its Conjuration DC, somewhere in that range, if you have all the gear and stuff. That's pretty much feasible for most players. However, that's still good enough to do most things, and Alchemists can generally just go over the top with number of effects and kind of brute force their way through. So in any type of circumstance where you might say, oh, well, the monsters all have evasion and I'm not going to hit them that often, it's actually not that big of a deal because you just cast another spell and you're fine. Overall, I think a lot of people sleep on Alchemist because the early leveling is so bad, but the higher level leveling and the epic stuff is so insanely good, it just always shocks me to see that Alchemist is one of the least played classes. Now, you might notice that I didn't even talk at all about the reaction state and reaction system. I think a lot of people get bogged down on the fact that Alchemists have a special reaction state system where they can change up their reaction states when they cast spells, and they get really intimidated by this system. It's important to note that 99% of the time, you don't need to worry about it. The general system is you have 3 different colors of spells, red, blue, and yellow, and when you cast them, you create a reaction state that is a combination of those 2 colors. Cast a yellow spell and then a red spell? Congratulations, you're in the orange reaction state, because yellow and red make orange. And now you have bonus spell damage. You can definitely learn how to change reaction states to get what you call spikes, which increases the effect of the reaction state dramatically for a very short period of time. But also, you kind of don't have to do that. A good chunk of the time while I was playing, I just ran around in Pyrite, which is the orange state. Pyrite gives you increased spell power with all of your damage spells. Yellow spells are damage and healing, and red spells are damage. So all I had to do was stay in yellow, was cast damage spells and healing spells. Yeah, it was pretty straightforward. I didn't really have to think about it. I just cast spells all the time, and I blew up monsters as I went around. Alchemist is designed in such a way where, depending on the difficulty you're playing on, the reaction system can be very, very optional to interact with, and not something I would say is a barrier to entry if you're worried that it might be too complicated, as depending on the thing that you're doing, your reaction is just going to change automatically and give you the stance that you would want. Oh, if you're casting crowd control spells, which are blue, and you're casting damage spells, which are red, that maybe makes the game think you're on the back foot, and maybe you need a extra little bit of support, so it puts you in the purple reaction state, or Kidium, which gives you huge defenses. It kind of just matches up with what you're doing, and you don't have to think about it a whole lot. So in general, I would say that the reaction state probably throws a lot of people off. The low levels throw a lot of people off, but if you haven't tried Alchemist yet, please don't sleep on this one. It's extremely good, and some of you might find your new favorite class and your new favorite character to run through 1 to 20 on all those racial lives you just gotta bang out. But enough yammering. You want to see how to make an Alchemist? Well, I'm going to pass it over to me with the build. Alchemist is super strong, and you can build your own Alchemist any way you want, as long as you build it exactly this way. Intelligence. That's right. You can build any type of Alchemist. You can get fire, you can be cold, you can be acid, you can be poison, and this entire build applies to every single one of those types, because all of them are built using the same framework. Intelligence, intelligence, intelligence. That's why I'm playing as a gnome on this Alchemist, because gnomes get more intelligence, and they get more intelligence out of their tree. And then Constitution as a secondary thing. But int, this is what you need, this is what you want, go into it, scale it, get as much as you can. Intelligence is also amazing for Alchemist, because not only do Alchemists get intelligence to their reflex saves for free, but they can also get intelligence to their will saves, which means once you've got enough intelligence plus gear, your character is going to have a extremely high fortitude reflex and will save, which is awesome. The one area where Alchemists generally tend to lack is in physical resistance rating, and that's because you can raise your physical resistance rating temporarily with some of the Alchemist casting things, such as the Orchidean reaction state. You're usually going to be wearing light or cloth armor, which means you're not going to have a lot of armor here to protect yourself, so just keep that in mind. As far as skills go, Alchemists get 1,000,000 intelligence, so you get all of them. The main ones, Spellcraft, because it affects your damage, Heal, it affects your healing, Search, because it's nice to detect doors, and I guess Haggle for money. Everything else is kind of unimportant. I had so many skills I could put 1,000,000 things into stuff. Oh, and I guess use Magic Device as well for Raising the Dead. Those would be the things. And of course, if you decided multi-class Rogue or something, make sure you take Disable Device. But I generally don't multi-class on Alchemist because the capstones are very good. Now, feats. What kind of feats do you take? Well, for me, I took most of the metamagic feats during the leveling process. Empower, Issue, Heighten, Maximize, and Quicken. You don't need Issue at all. It was just mildly convenient. I would say don't take this feat. Just use Draconic Incarnation, which is what I ended up doing, so I never needed this. So this was a free feat. But Heighten, Maximize, Quicken, and Empower. You also get the ability to cast Maximize and Quicken all the time because you can heavily reduce the cost no matter how you play it, which is pretty cool. On top of that, I also took the Spell Focus feats, so I'm talking about Greater Spell Focus and Spell Focus Conjuration to increase my spell casting with Conjuration spells. And then, as Alchemist feats, you also get bonuses, such as Liquid Luck, giving you Evasion, Insightful Courage, giving you that intelligence to your will saves, and then increasing your cash levels with your Alchemical Studies Pirate and Advanced Alchemical Studies. In terms of epic feats, this character, I actually went with all of the metamagic, so Intensify and Embolden, since you do have a good amount of spell-like abilities to scale these on top of. Wellspring of Power, and then Epic Spell Focus Mastery Conjuration. Now, it's actually interesting. You could make a couple changes. One of the big changes is instead of taking Eschew, you decided to take Toughness somewhere in this build, and you had enough Constitution to take Epic Toughness. You could replace that and then also this with Epic Toughness and get about an extra 83 hit points, which is not too bad in terms of general leveling. For Epic Destiny feats, I did take the Epic Spell Power, Poison, and Acid on this version. You don't necessarily need to do that, but I'll kind of talk about that in a bit. And Deific Warding is just a classic feat. You could sub in one of these for Crush Weakness if you need, because Crush Weakness does give you extra crit damage, which is very strong for this type, or not crit damage, helpless damage, and you can make stuff helpless pretty easily with Alchemist. And then Legendary Sign of the Plane of Earth is what I took because I'm playing as a Acid Alchemist. You can take the other ones, but this is the only one that gives Conjuration DCs, unfortunately, which is one of the reasons why Alchemists are pretty good at being Conjuration users and Acid users and Poison users more than other things, just because you don't get the Conjuration DCs, which is kind of unfortunate for some of the other ones. So you want to have this here, Concentrate Conjuration and Transmutation, which is pretty strong. Whereas if I go to the Show Unavailable and you look at some of the other Legendary feats, they don't show up. But yeah, they're not as exciting. However, what spells do you want to take here? In general, you just take all the, I did Acid, so whatever element you end up taking, just take all of that element the entire way up. So I did Acid spells, so I just took every Acid spell during the level process and cast them. Area of Effect spells really starting in once you get Caustic Solvent, which makes it a lot easier, and then grabbing Caustic Overload, just more Acid Area of Effect, and then by the time you hit 12, you take Multivial, and you're going to find yourself pretty much only casting Multivial from then on. Additionally, the buff spells are pretty nice, having stuff like Stiffened Skin, Elemental Skin, being able to give yourself Feather Falling, extra defense from Augmented Armor. These are all really powerful. It's important to remember that even though there are a lot of good defensive abilities, take the offensive spells first, and then once you've moved past that level, then swap out some of your older offensive spells for the defensive buffs. If you take the defensive buffs first, you won't have enough mana to sustain yourself, and your spells won't really deal this amount of damage that you want. So focus on defensive buffs or offensive attacks first, and then defensive buffs later. Additionally, you can also pick up heals during the process. So while I was leveling, I took stuff like Curative Admixture, Cure Light Wounds, and things because it was helpful. Now let's talk Alchemist enhancements. Now, I think the enhancement tree does kind of change and evolve over time, but in general, this is what you want to use: Bombardier, Apothecary. These are kind of like the bread and butter. Now, you have two different ways about doing this. Previously, I would have gone like 41 points in Apothecary for the Curative Admixture heal. I think this is extremely powerful. Getting also the extra crit here is nice, and the extra intelligence is pretty good. And I just like having the Admixture heal since you can apply all your metamagics to it and have this heal for like 6,000 or something silly at a very low cost. However, I think that the way I'm currently doing it right here, where there's more Fey Dark Illusionist and Gnome, is a little bit better. Picking up some more intelligence, just having stronger spells overall, since your healing is already so good, and the new Epic Destinies provide so much more healing than they did before for Alchemist. As far as Bombardier goes, I didn't actually take all of the crit. The reason is 2% crit is nice, but it was for 4 points, and I weighed that against just having cheaper Maximize, cheaper Quicken, and cheaper Heighten, which means you can cast more spells, which Sure, you don't crit as often, but you get more entire spells cast out, which is usually pretty good. So I prioritize that over this, and as well as the extra intelligence here. And then picked up the Burning Ambition, and then also the Acid Bypass. No matter what Alchemist element you take, I went with Acid because Acid is the least resisted during the entire leveling process. But right here, this bypass means once you get to 12, it doesn't matter what element you pick. They all bypass all the time, including poison, which makes it very, very easy to use. And it's one of the reasons why a lot of people use Poison Alchemist, since Poison Alchemist, one, can use the Dreadkeeper set that comes out of the Sharn Dox chain, which gives you poison spell power and a bunch of poison damage. And on top of that, also has Cloth Armor, and Intelligence is one of the better sets. And Poison also scales off of Fortitude saves, or like it hits enemies' Fortitude saves and not Reflex saves, so you can completely ignore the entire effect of Evasion, which is, again, very nice when you're getting started. But I went with Acid because Acid is cool and it's green. So I grabbed all this stuff here, pretty good. Apothecary went in for Cure Serious Wounds. Cure Serious Admixture is just nice to have. During the leveling process, I grabbed the Inflict, or the Cure Light right here, and I use this all the time, since you take Maximize at level 1, and it just keeps you and all your friends alive the entire time. Additionally, during the leveling process, you want to make sure you take the Spell Vial here, because this is just a big hit that you can just slam into people and do damage, so I would definitely recommend going with this one. And then, Fade Dark Illusionist and Gnome. So once you have this stuff here, you're pretty free reign to spend the points wherever you wanted. I went with Fade Dark Illusionist because having access to Greater Color Spray is just awesome during the leveling process as an Alchemist. And since I'm a Gnome, in theory, I could have gone up for the Illusion DCs. I didn't, but I could have. But the actual Color Spray here is really, really strong. The difference is Color Spray out of the Gnome tree actually has a lower DC for some reason. It's an 11, whereas this is a 17. So this is just more consistent. And so I just decided to go with Greater Color Spray out of this tree. And then I get extra intelligence here, as well as extra spell power for having the cat summoned, because you get 20 spell power and 20 force. You don't need the force, but the 20 universal is still just nice to have. And of course, Gnome for the extra intelligence. And as far as epic destinies go, well, I tried a couple different things. Primal Avatar and Draconic Incarnation. And also, I guess on the back half, I'm going to throw in Shirati here as well. There's a couple different ways to play Alchemist, and I think it really depends on your flavor and general playstyle. Primal Avatar versus Draconic are both very, very, very good. Draconic is powerful because you just get the energy burst, which does a whole ton of damage all in one go. You get the Pull from the Wellspring, which allows your Wellspring of Power, which is a huge buff that increases your damage by a lot, to last twice as long and give you a bunch of temporary spell points. And as you move up to tier 5, you could consider taking the Ruin and Greater Ruin, or you just get the Bring About Destruction, which makes it so your Venom concentration spells, or all of your Alchemist damage over time spells, get additional stacks. So they stack up to 7 times, which really makes it formidable against raid bosses. So it's quite good. However, Primal Avatar is also kind of interesting as well. Primal Avatar has access to Carrion Swarm and Shard Storm. Carrion Swarm does a surprisingly gigantic amount of damage, and it's fairly easy to build both acid and negative damage, since there's quite a few items in the game that actually just have both, which is pretty powerful. And this spell does a gigantic amount of damage with no saving throw. And since it has no save, you can use it all the time. And I use this to actually level this character in Ravenloft R1 at level 24, because it doesn't even matter what their saving throws are. This just does damage that goes right through that and just penetrates, and it's always going to be hitting targets. Same thing with Shardstorm. It just does damage, so you can just cast it and it starts hitting nearby monsters, and the damage is a lot more than you think it is. It says a D4, don't worry about that. It actually scales pretty well. Additionally, you can even get the upgrade for Shardstorm, so it doubles its damage, and it gives you a temporary hit point shield, making you a lot more defensive and tanky. Another thing that I didn't realize about this tree is Evergreen. It says it gives you 100 mana, and when using your mantle, your nature spells have a chance to grant you 100 temporary spell points. This goes off all of the time. I can't believe how often this goes off. I could never run out of mana once I took this. It was insane. It was so powerful. I highly recommend this. I had never used this before, and it just blew my mind how good this was. Wow, this is an amazing ability. I think you have to use the mantle, though. So that's obviously the big downside, which means you wouldn't be able to use the Shirati mantle over here. And then, of course, grabbing extra metamagic reduction costs. So my metamagic was free on Maximize. Maximize costed literally 0. And reducing the Intensify. It meant that my character was only paying 5 for all my metamagics. Heighten and Quicken, Maximize and Intensify, and Embolden, I was paying 5. Right? All of those metamagics on there. So getting everything stacked up with all the metamagic cost reduction is actually surprisingly good with this type of character, especially considering you can also get extra spell point cost reduction from Draconic, because they're both pretty good. And then the rest of the tier 5s, I didn't take Mass Frog just because I didn't really screw around with it. But if you want to fit in transmutation bonuses, you definitely can use Mass Frog as well, which is insanely good instant kill on a 1-minute cooldown. Very, very good ability. The elemental things that you can summon, I think the only ally that's good is the Dryad. I don't think that the other ones are that strong. However, I haven't really experimented with them. I probably should have, but I didn't because I wanted to reincarnate. So, the elephant in the room, Shirati Champion. Prism is very, very good with all spellcasters, and so is Stay Good and Stay Frosty. Both of these have an extremely high chance to proc and deal damage on monsters. They're really good. Should you use them on an Alchemist? The answer is usually yes. They add just a tremendous amount of damage. They're always good, and you could argue that it might be actually better than this mantle here and the mana effect. So I actually played this character twice. I did once with Draconic and once with Primal Avatar. In Draconic, I ran the Shirati Mantle, and in Primal, I ran it with the this setup you see right here. I think I was doing more damage with the Shirati Mantle, but my sustain was way better with the Primal Mantle, so I was casting more spells, so the damage also ended up kind of being the same. You never need to worry about the actual amount of spells you're casting with the Primal version, because you always have enough mana to cast whatever you want, versus Draconic, where you actually have to manage it a little bit, and I ran out quite often. So overall, I would say that they're both good, and Shirati is extremely powerful, but there's really no losing with Alchemist. Hell, you could even go tier 5 of Shirati and just go all the way up here for the Stay Good and Stay Frosty for the paralyzation chance, although it's definitely not as good as these other options. That's something you could definitely consider. So don't feel backed into a corner with Alchemist. You have a lot of good options, especially for poison and acid. Maybe for fire and some of the other ones, you would go, I don't know, if you're going fire, jump into Exalted Angel and grab Holy Fireball in your Alchemist. I'm not so sure. But at least here, Draconic and Primal Avatar felt like they were some of the best ones for acid and poison. Anyways, I talk about gear, but I put all my items away. But basically, you know, you're looking for intelligence items, the spell powers that you need. So always healing spell power, and then whatever element you actually cast. Constitution, fortification items, physical magical resistance rating items, spell point items, things that say conjuration DCs. And that's basically it. Those are all the items you really need, and anything else just kind of a bonus. Charisma items for use magic device? Sure. Bonuses saving throws? Always handy. So a lot of good effects in there. Just kind of use whatever you can. I leveled this character. Once I got to around level 15, I think I stopped equipping stuff, except for the Keep on the Borderland Scepters at 20, because those are kind of busted for leveling, and then that was it. It just ran all the way to 30 twice in a row. So, Alchemist, something you should definitely try playing. Sure, it's kind of bad from level 1 to 6, and it doesn't level quite as fast as a sorcerer from 6 to 12, but my god, once you hit level 12, you just start cruising. It's that moment where you're just trying to cut the paper, and you're just like cutting paper with your scissors, and you're cutting paper, and all of a sudden, boom, your paper starts, you know, the scissors glide along the paper and just cut the whole thing in half. That's Alchemist. A bit rough from 1 to 12, but from 12 to Cap, my god, it levels like a dream, and it's something you should definitely consider trying. Anyways, that's all I have for you today, so thank you for watching. If you like what you saw, make sure you go below and smash that subscribe button, and also like that positive vibes good button. Leave me a comment if you think there's anything I should change or improve about this build. Let me know, and that's all I have. Enjoy the rest of your day, and I'm going to make a new character build right now that's so exciting, you can't even wait for the next video. You're gonna have to sit here paralyzed and stuck to your screen being like, oh my god, when is the next video gonna come out? When do I get to see it? It's gonna be amazing. This next character build, oh, because the Alchemist is already so good. When is the next one gonna come out? How can I get there? And will I even have time to play Alchemist before the new one comes out? I don't know.